Hi, this is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Always warm, always sunny. Sometimes Colorado. Today is April 4th, 2024. It just dawned on me that I didn't make a video on April 1st. I should have done that, but the crypto media works in strange and mysterious ways. Well, anyway, I wanted to make a video because I get asked a heck of a lot about the 2024 election and who am I supporting or what do I believe, these types of things. And recently, I was actually at Ethereum Denver, and I had a chance to talk to RFK's people while I was there. And I'm trying to set up a dinner with RFK. And I get asked a lot about what do I think of RFK Jr. and his campaign and the current state of affairs in 2024. You know, it's a challenging thing being an American right now because the system has been structured and rigged in a way where what we really want, we don't get. And we're told to accept a situation that is not very good. It's really a choice between dementia and demented, as I like to say. You have two candidates, both of which have been president for 4 years, running against each other, who are both very old and have very controversial track records and are remarkably polarizing and have invested a huge amount of their time into dividing people. And when we look at America, there's over 300 million people that live in the United States. We have some of the best and brightest and most talented and capable people. And for some reason, the system is built in a way to prevent those people from being able to actually run for president. Every now and then you see them run, and either they're delegitimized or excluded. So RFK is part of American royalty. There's a lovely book called The Real RFK Jr. and talks about his history. He's overcome a lot. He was born in a very prominent family. His uncle was the president of the United States. His father probably was going to be the president, both of which were assassinated. And his other uncle was a very prominent senator who also ran for president. Kennedy family's been in American politics since long before I was born and when my dad was a little kid. So obviously, when you come from a legacy like that, you have a deep and very mature understanding of America as it was and America as it is today. Ordinarily, when a person with his life story and his legacy and understanding runs, they're a legitimate candidate and they should have been given an opportunity to participate in debates and the political process. He was excluded from that political process, much the same token that Bernie Sanders was in 2016. On the other side of the aisle, the Republican Party has been co-opted, and it belongs to a single person, for better or for worse, who is unpredictable. And while he has done some interesting and good things, like I'd argue the Abraham Accords, for example, were able to help the Middle East towards peace, also has done some puzzling and very counterproductive things and has had his time. So I'd like something different. I'd like some choice on the matter. But what I'm told every election cycle is hold your nose and vote for the lesser of two evils. And this is by design. There's one thing in the United States where there is universal bipartisan agreement. And that is only Republicans and only Democrats can hold higher office. Everyone else is not legitimate and can't. And you're going to be reminded of this if you are an American come November by both political parties, and they're going to demonize and try to destroy RFK and everything about him. His own family has joined the Biden White House, and they're forming a task force to try to attack him. And we'll see some of the most vicious personal attacks ever levied in the next 6 months, not because they hate him, not because they actually particularly disagree with him. I'd like to believe reasonable people may have a place in their heart for a healthy environment and safe drinking water and good food, or some really significant questions about the bizarre relationship between the US government and Fortune 500 companies, where they never seem to quite be held accountable and have enormous influence on policy. This seemed to used to be a Democrat talking point in particular, but I guess this cycle doesn't matter. It's because he's a threat to power, and he's a threat to the perception that you only have two choices, and all other choices are meaningless and don't matter. I'd like to believe that it's time we start considering people whose campaign is to heal instead of harm. I'd like to believe that the United States of America can do better than recycling the same candidates and having us all accept another 4 years of anger, hate, and division. Because here's the reality. No matter who wins, Biden or Trump, and there's a strong possibility, almost a certainty, one of those two will, the reality is that the other side will say it is the worst thing that's ever happened in American history. Protests in the street, anger, denial of election integrity, and a belief that the United States is going to now die and be destroyed. And the entire point of the opposition party will be to destroy whatever's done by this party in power. Does that make any sense to you? Is that good governance? Is that sustainable? If every election cycle, less people participate, less legitimacy on the outcome is achieved, and we live in a reality where people basically hate each other and they don't really even understand the issues. We don't even understand what we believe. We don't even have missions anymore. When we look at our foreign policy, when we intervene, we don't know why we intervene, what the outcome we want to achieve is. There's no coherence to it. People who were friends are now enemies. People who are enemies are now friends, and it can change on a moment's notice, and we're just all expected to fall in line. When we look at our national debt, $34+ trillion, and people are priming and preparing us for a reality that within a few decades, it could be over $100 trillion with no plan in sight to reduce it and no sacrifice on the federal government side. The budget that was proposed was $7.3 trillion. And does anybody honestly believe that if we elect the other party, that they'll somehow make it better when they were also a contributor to this massive debt? It increased under every administration of my life, with the brief exception of a small window during the Clinton administration. And the last time we really truly made meaningful progress on reducing the national debt was during the Eisenhower administration in the 1950s, from 1952 to 1960, when my dad was born. That tells you how little they think about these things. And when you look at your daily experience, your ability to buy things at the pump, the gas pump, the grocery store, your rent just keeps going up, and your standard of living keeps going down. In terms of chronic ailments and mental illness, when JFK took office in 1961, 6% of the American population suffered from a chronic ailment or mental illness. Today, it's over 60% when you combine it together, depending on how you count it. A 10x increase. Did we suddenly just develop new genes? Did a bomb go off and give us all some sort of weird virus? No, it's lifestyle that's changed. And the very same people who pushed that are those same Fortune 500 companies that lead and control the U.S. government and tell us every election cycle that anybody who denies them their power is illegitimate, a conspiracy theorist, and a bad actor. We deal with the consequences of it at my clinic. When we see people die before their time, we have over 7,000 patients there. We see so many people on more than a dozen prescription drugs, on an oxygen tank, with diabetes and other chronic ailments, suffering profoundly. They don't have a good quality of life. And they're good people. They played by the rules. They just did the things they were told to do. And those things converted over to maladies, which they now suffer from for the rest of their time. It should be a national priority to have a conversation. Why do we do what we do? Whether that be our education system, our healthcare system, how we spend money, how the federal bureaucracy works, our foreign policy. But instead, it's vote for me because the other person is so evil and destructive that you have to prevent them from having power. Don't care about what I say and actually do. Don't care about the outcome. Don't measure anything. And if you do measure it, it's wrong and biased because the evil people on the other side influenced it. And I'll lead you to paradise. That's not a choice. That's not a constitutional republic. That's not democratic consent. That's basically a fiction. and for being the most powerful and wealthiest nation, and the nation that created the internet, the nation that's brought so much good to the entire world. It's about time each and every one of us takes a moment, wakes up a bit, and asks yourself, why can't we be different? We shouldn't ask for perfection in people. We shouldn't ask that we agree with every single thing a person says and does. But what we should ask for is some basic stuff, like the ability to change your mind and compromise, integrity, and also the ability to think freely and creatively and hold people accountable for when they do bad things. If you look at the career of RFK, this is precisely who he is and what he's done. By no means a saint. He's had many challenges from addiction, made a lot of mistakes in his early days. But you know what? He's a fighter. And he turned a lot of things around, and he did hold people accountable. And he makes some good decisions. He realized that the current immigration policy in the United States is not sustainable or reasonable, and turned his back on his political party's views and took a more nuanced view. He also looked into the troubling relationship between the FDA and the current pharmaceutical industry and how it really is hurting every single American at our core, and is trying to hold them accountable, and written a lot of books about it, made a lot of statements about it, some of which you might agree with, some of which you might implicitly say are anti-science or conspiracy theories, mostly because the media told you that, not because you actually looked into the arguments and statements, which certainly may have some flaws, but at very least invites a conversation, especially about informed consent. And that is the bedrock of medical ethics. We have an obligation to always challenge and question, because at the end of the day, people's health is at stake. When we look to his VP that he select, Nicole Shanahan, we have some personal connections. Input-Output works with Stanford through David Shee in his lab and computer science department, and we have a lot of great respect for Codex, a lab at the Stanford School of Law that thinks about computational law, something that is directly connected to smart contracts and regulation in our industry. She's part of that. She's also part of AI policy and a lot of next generation ideas, many of which are completely unrepresented in our conversation in government. Think for a moment about how ill-prepared the current people who govern us are for the problems of the 21st century. No one in the Biden administration or the old Trump and perhaps the new Trump administration understands AI, worked with AI, and truly actually knows where this is going. The single most transformative technology for our entire economy, our lifestyle, and how all of our children will be educated. We're recusing ourselves as a governing body and allowing a small group of unelected people carte blanche to do basically whatever they want to do and monopolize their control over the technology. There is no national conversation happening on the most consequential technology of my lifetime. This is the first VP selected who actually did work in that. She used to be married to Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google, and through that exposure had an enormous amount of influence. Also in her own personal life story, in her work at Stanford and in her startups was connected to that. That shows good judgment and knowing what is coming. Where are we going as a society? It's the same for crypto. This is an industry that went from nothing to a multi-trillion-dollar industry in 15 years. We don't see that in business, and this indeed is the future. It's one of the exponential technologies that will change the world. His candidacy is the only one that actually respected our industry enough to show up at our industry's events and talk and directly engage with our industry. That meant something. Even if we disagree on certain things, it meant that at least there's a person there willing to hear and listen. At least there's a person there we can negotiate with as an industry, talk to, and figure out a path forward. I don't see that in the major parties. I see them telling us what we have to accept and say, get used to it and get in the corner. That's not what America was founded on. I thought this was a trust in the Lockean notion for us, the American people, the beneficiaries, to enjoy. It's not the state. It's not in charge of our lives. And if you want to reset and get back to what we should have been, you need a government that listens, engages, and actually understands who is helping the nation move forward. And our industry as a whole, while it's made mistakes, like all industries, look at the oil and gas industry under Standard Oil in the 1870s and 1880s and 1890s, refineries exploding all the time, dumping gasoline because it was a waste material at the time into the rivers. All of the terrible ways they treated their employees, the deaths making the pipelines. Don't believe for a moment that any industry during its founding is clean. You can't find a single one. The automobile industry, the aerospace industry, even in the beginning when we were learning how jet engines work, look at how many test pilots died during that time period. Net, all in 15 years, crypto's doing pretty good, and the good has outweighed the harm by orders of magnitude. So we should be listened to as an industry because we have new ideas and we have ways of fixing old institutions to restore trust and credibility. There wasn't a Trump booth there. There wasn't a Biden booth there, but there was an RFK booth. That meant something to me. That meant something to a lot of people in our industry. So I think these are good things. And I do believe there's a strong possibility that this election will be like 1992 and that the third-party candidates will have an outsized influence. I don't believe it'll be enough for him to win, but that's okay because it can form a movement and it can form a lot of people who say, you know, we've had enough. We want to heal instead of harm, and it's about time we change the system and we change the rules of the system. My firm belief is the only way we're going to be able to get out of all of this is at this juncture a constitutional convention, because the federal government and the bureaucracy accompanying it is designed to preserve itself and its own power and destroy anything that's a threat to it. And if anybody comes close, they will be destroyed. But it's time to remind the American people of one truth we were founded on. We are in charge, not the government. It works for us. There's been too many election cycles. There's been too many actions. There's been too many bureaucratic overreaches that have moved in the opposite direction, saying you are not in charge. The raison d'etre of our industry is to restore that basic principle on a global basis to everyone, whether it be a self-sovereign identity argument, whether it be you being your own bank, or restoring integrity to institutions like the ability to vote fairly and freely and in a way with auditability, ensuring that you know that the system was fair. These are basic human principles, and they are prerequisites to a free society, a society that cares about liberty. We can no longer endorse systems that perpetually move in the opposite direction. I'm not going to vote for the lesser of two evils. I'm just not going to do it anymore. I'm not part of that system. So today, April 4th, 2024, I'm going to vote for somebody who I believe actually could make a difference, regardless if he wins. So I'm endorsing and supporting RFK. He's the horse to ride in November. I wish him well. I wish his campaign well. And I hope a lot of people get inspired. Win or lose, I hope people take from this election a strong civic sense that we do need to change things. We do need to move forward. And it's time we heal ourselves in every dimension and respect. I hope that everybody listening understands that. And I hope that people know that we could always make things better. No matter how bad it seems, how bad it gets, we as people can make a heaven or a hell. And the difference is the intent and will and the time. We can fix everything. It just requires the will, and it just requires the commitment over a protracted period of time to get there. So thank you all for listening. And I hope we get through this election cycle. It's the hardest one since 1876. Cheers.